My name is Christine Han, and I am an arts writer. Thank you for joining us today on this conversation in conjunction with Singapore Ceramics Now. Today we have with us Jason Lim, artistic director of this exhibition, together with artists Madhvi, Subrahmanian, and Aiwei. Hello, Jason, Madhvi, and Aiwei.
Hi.
Okay, let me introduce our speakers. About Jason Lim, he graduated from the Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design in 1992 with a Bachelor of Arts honours. He received a Master of Fine Arts degree from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology through LaSalle College of the Arts Singapore 2003. In 2007, he presented Just Dharma and Lightweight at the Singapore Pavilion in the 52nd Venice Biennale. About Madhvi Subrahmanian, artist, curator, and writer, Madhvi lives and works in Singapore, frequently showing in her city of birth, Mumbai. Her practice is informed by her migratory life, and her multiple forms are often set in participatory or immersive installations. Madhvi is a member of the International Academy of Ceramics, Geneva and Artists USA. She trained at the Golden Bridge Pottery, Pondicherry, and has a Master of Fine Arts from SMU Dallas. She has shown at several ceramic biennials as well as at museums internationally. About Aiwei Fu, she is a multidisciplinary artist with a background in fine arts and fashion design. The notion of the blurring of art and life is what spurred Aiwei to constantly explore life as an art form and to integrate art into life. Aiwei's works include visuals, textiles, drawing, writing, music, video, and performance art. Aiwei was featured artist on Unknown Asia Art Exchange Osaka in 2016. At the same event, she was awarded the Judge Prize from Gem Factory Bangkok, among other awards and recognition, and was also one of the artist ambassadors for Japan Art Travel in 2019. Today, ceramics is a broad field in which increasingly radical ideas are explored. Ted Adler, an American potter and artist, has this to say about ceramics. As a mode of signification, ceramics is uniquely poised to engage a range of theoretical perspectives. It permeates high and low culture. It is decorative and utilitarian. It is material and conceptual. It is both lasting and ephemeral. It is not one thing and it is not self-contained. So it seems that ceramics can mean a whole lot of things. In this exhibition of Singapore artists working in clay, we see a range of strikingly exploratory works, and which also grapples with issues such as the debate between craft and art, and the need for critical dialogue around ceramics as an art medium. We are excited about this exhibition and invite you to take a look here with us. We play the exhibition trailer. I hope you enjoyed the trailer and do come by to check out the exhibition. All right, if anyone in the audience has got a question or a comment at any point in time, feel free to type +1 in the chat box. As we talked about earlier, ceramics has a multiple concept and finds itself in all disciplines and positions. In recent years, ceramics has been reimagined by artists in exhibitions and in studios. So hello again, Jason, Madhvi, and Aiwei. If I might start our discussion by asking each of you, in your own case, what might ceramics stand for? So Jason, could you start us off?
Ceramics for me is a material that I've worked with the last 30 years. I kind of really feel very connected with this material is because it's something that's really organic, and then through touching with the touch of the hand, it changes its different state. So it's a very, for me, in that sense, that changes and different state of clay to me is that what ceramics meant for me, because it goes through a transitional state, very much like my performance work. There is also ephemeral and always in the transitional kind of process.
And how about Madhvi?
Yeah, I think for me, ceramic is like a visual, is like a language, and it's also my means of expression. It's the way I think. I think through this material. I even if I did some drawings, they're usually never a translation. And my work will always be in dialogue with my drawings, or with my ceramic, or some of my now more a little bit of photography and stuff like that. So it's always my original thought is always in clay. So
Right.
I think in clay.
And your thoughts, Aiwei?
Actually, in my own practice, I seldom use clay as a medium, but only recent year, because I start to do tea-related performances, and I start to realize that actually ceramic is a very intimate material to me, because all the cups and pots and all the things that I use in the tea room is actually made of like ceramics or porcelain. So it totally changed my perception of how clay in my overall work. And also because this time we make some teacups for the tea room, and actually I think it's very interesting to make your own cups and any vessels. So I think in the future we would like to do more of this ceramic ware. So I think it's a really good thing for me, I mean, this time to take part in this.
Right. Okay. I think one of the reasons why ceramics today is so different and so appealing is that this medium brings together long traditions and new ideas. There is history, there is function, there is beauty, and people are coming back to look at these things with a new pair of eyes. On the other hand, there are artists who can also do very non-ceramic things with ceramics and present them in very non-traditional ways. So, Jason, you have shown the way from your very early work, installation and performance piece, 3 Tons of Clay, shown at a substation in 1995. The gallery was covered with unfired clay. You were covered head to toe in clay, and the audience were invited to participate. Your work questions the notion of the artist as maker of art. And at that time, art historian T.K. Sabapathy had described your approach to the medium as denying craftsmanship. What were you thinking?
I think first, TK Sabapathy's quote is interesting because a lot of times I'm kind of in that particular work, I'm trying to review the nature of clay and how clay behaves in a given time and space. So for this exhibition in Substation, um, it's a collaboration work with another artist, Ang Siu Kwan. Basically, our idea is to expose the characteristic of clay to the public. What we did was that we plastered the whole gallery space with clay, and then in the opening of the exhibition, I did a short performance inviting artists to cocoon me to the pillar of the substation. After which, I broke away from the pillar and did some small action about with making forms that references the traditional use of clay in making vessels. And then towards the end of the performance, I add a lump of clay, and that was the end of the performance. So in this performance, when I first start thinking about it, and it's also the first time I actually have a chance to present a work in a gallery, or actually a kind of a major exhibition for myself. I was like just throwing myself right to the end of the the spectrum of what is possible in using clay as a medium. I I guess for me it's an important piece of work for me because prior to this exhibition, for 2 or 3 years since I came back from as a young graduate from overseas, I haven't got a chance to acquire to have a studio space to continue my practice. But I was still making clay work, unfired pieces in my bedroom, and that few years of working with unfired clay makes me that come to term that I'm not really at that time a ceramist, but an artist who just uses clay as a material. So that's in a way an important switch in my mind, in my frame of mind of how to approach using clay as a material rather than using clay as a ceramist. So in this exhibition, basically the clay was left in a space. Uh, in the initial few days, the whole gallery space felt very damp because it's all wet clay and has also a very musky smell to it because of dampness of the clay. And towards the end of the exhibition, the clay starts to dry. The atmosphere in the gallery starts to become more dusty because clay dries out. And then as people walk through the gallery space, there was dust just floating around. You can really literally smell the dusty atmosphere. And at certain times when you're in the gallery, pieces of clay will just fall off the gallery wall because clay, when it dries, it shrinks and then just fall off from the plaster itself, the painted wall of the gallery space. So throughout this, I kind of learned about um, creating a kind of installation work that involve more than just visual. It involves the other sensorial experience when we encounter an artwork.
Right. Ceramics, despite it being one of the oldest mediums of self-expressions, have largely been ignored in contemporary art, it seems, or a general observation by some. Would you agree on that? And given your work with the galleries, art institutions, and artists, and your contributions to the ceramic field in general, how have you seen contemporary ceramics evolving in Singapore over the past years?
Definitely, a lot of artists now are using clay as a medium for making non-functional works, more sculptural works, object-based. I think in a way that using the medium now is using them to approach in a more in contemporary practice. And I guess it's also clay is such a tactile material. It's quite in a way it's a very human material to a certain extent. It's very easy for people to be addicted to it. When they first touch clay, they just would not kind of want to stop using it. So I think it's a very flexible material for contemporary artists to explore the possibility of this material. Um, what was your beginning question? I forgot. um,
And
what was
also, yeah,
your first question?
first question was about that ceramics, despite it being one of the oldest mediums of self-expressions, have largely been ignored in contemporary art,
Oh yeah.
a general observation by some people. So you agree on that?
I don't really agree on that because there are many great artists who has been using clay as part of their body of work. Maybe it's because of the other system of art like art market and art fair. People tend to show more of the two-dimensional work that artists has been doing. You know, people artists like Fontana, Picasso, they all done a lot of they've done a lot of ceramic works. It's just that they are less frequently shown. So we only know these artists as making 2D work, but not so much of their three-dimensional work.
And you want to show your other works, just Dharma and the rest, and talk to
Okay,
them?
yeah. Three tons of clay was my first approach in kind of exploring the ephemeral quality in installation work. And in this work, Venice Biennale that I did called Just Dharma, in a way, this period of time, 2007 onwards, is a period of time that I'm trying to merge my two of my practices, performance and ceramic, together. And this is one of the um, kind of important milestone in my practice, that I thought that my performance practice and my ceramic practice come together quite nicely, because there's quite equal balance of making and also in the performative element in this installation. So to begin with, how this work came about, when we first invited to do a site visit, this whole palazzo was very highly decorated. There's none, all rooms are highly decorated with Murano glass chandeliers. The walls are fabric walls, so there are not really any walls that can nail anything on to hang anything. So after the site visit, I kind of thought that my original plan, I have to throw it into the Grand Canal. I can't use that anymore, because it's such a challenging site. You can't put anything in there to really challenge the existing decor in that space. So on the way back in the airplane, I was still quite thinking hard about how to come up with a new proposal for this Biennale. So I was thinking, oh, since there are so many chandeliers, I thought, oh, maybe I should make another chandelier. If you can't beat them, join them in that sense. So slowly I start to conceptualize that my chandelier is going to have flower motifs, but a kind of Asian flower motif that represent Asianness of where we come from. Because the Murano chandelier that existed in the space are all like European flowers, kind of like with tulips and things like that. So with deeper research into the symbolism of the lotus flower, is connected to Buddhism and Buddhism philosophy of the cycle of life, birth, death, and rebirth. So I thought creating the work itself is like giving birth to the work, and then to work with the lights is to kind of give life to the work as well, because in the performance, the lights follows a certain breathing that I can hear around me in the space. I'm the one who controls the dimmer, so that the lights gives lives to the whole chandelier. And then I was contemplating on, so how do I represent death in this chandelier, in this piece of work? And I guess the only way I can give death to a work is by destroying it. Therefore, dropping the chandelier is one way to, in a way, complete the work, and also at the same time give a new life to the crashed chandelier. So the rebirth part of this exhibition, of this piece of work, I think it's interesting to hear from um, audience who have not seen the work, but the stories that they hear from it. And there are many different stories or versions of how the chandelier came about, crashing from the ceiling to the ground. Should we go to the next work?
The still life?
Yeah, still life. I started this project sometime in 2007, but this version here is I think it's the last version I did for this series of work. What happened is this work is that I have about 100 over um, pots unfired, and it's displayed in a vitrine. On the opening day of the exhibition, I introduced water into the vessels that is placed at the top. Um, because the vessels are not fired, it becomes saturated with water, and then they start to break down into clay. So in the beginning moment, you start to see cracks forming at the pot at the top. Then they become like fountains pouring out from the sides, from the crack lines, and then the water would flow right down to the base of the vitrine. So with water flowing, with water accumulated at the base of the vitrine, the vessels at the bottom starts to soften, and then there's become a kind of like a chain reaction of slowly a kind of collapse happening. So, but you don't see the drama of it on in the first hour or the first day. All this thing happens through time. So this exhibition lasted for about 20 days. So the picture on the left is how it was as the beginning, and the picture on the right is how the remains of the piece after 20 days. So the bottom part of the tank, you can see all the dissolved vessel has gone back to its natural state as clay. The next
And the
slide.
banyan tree?
Yeah, when I first started making clay work, as I was mentioning earlier, when I first came back from overseas, I don't have a studio to make clay work. But I was still making unfired clay work in my bedroom, a very small floor space of 1 meter by 1 meter. You know, making small objects. And in fact, actually, I spend more time cleaning up than actually making work because clay dust just gets everywhere. But it's interestingly, I came back in 1992, started off making unfired work, and then now, like 20 plus years later, I start to kind of come in the full circle, making a bigger installation work that remains unfired. So I thought it's interesting how my practice has come in the full circle in such a way. So for the banyan tree project, this in ICA is the second itinerary. Second time that I did this piece. The first time was in Jakarta Biennale. In both of the Jakarta Biennale and the one presented in ICA, it was a durational performance installation piece. Each day I spent time in the studio, in the gallery for about 6 hours and for 6 days to complete what you see as the finished piece on the left. I guess for me, also every day I come in, I work with a certain rhythm. So that 6 hours create a kind of natural rhythm and momentum in the creation of the work. So the picture on the right can almost see the kind of rhythm of my thumbprint pressing down onto the clay, which creates a kind of a rhythmic way of seeing how the piece is being built. For me, I try as much as possible in a lot of my ceramic work not to blend the markings that I make on the work. So it's in order to give the audience the kind of idea or chance to reconstruct or reimagine how the artwork is being created by kind of like tracing the marks that is made on the work, and hopefully they are able to reconstruct the making process.
Very nice. Thanks, Jason.
Welcome.
For a long time, ceramic discussions have typically been interested in process and material. How something was made has taken precedence over how ceramics makes meaning. Today, however, artists are increasingly using the medium to convey their message. So, Madhvi, in 2017, you made an installation called Ode to the Unknown for the Indian Heritage Centre that was in response to the history of ceramics in Singapore. And for this exhibition, Singapore Ceramics Now, your work, Pandemic Tales, is a reflection of the coronavirus pandemic. Would you like to talk about these works and their meaning and significance behind?
Thank you, Christine. For the work Ode to the Unknown, it came about by my proposal to the museum, to India Heritage Center, which was having a show of craft in India, and they were showcasing a whole bunch of different crafts that came from India. So my proposal was really based on really where I am located, A, in Singapore, and B, my location of my studio, which was at the Dragon Kiln. And it was at this Dragon Kiln that they were making cups and pipes and things like that for Singapore. And I had seen this little cup in the museum's collection, which very often was kind of bypassed by most people. It was just a very not a cup that got too many eyeballs. And I was quite fascinated with this cup that was made in Singapore for collecting rubber, because within that cup for me was the story of Singapore, of colonial Singapore. The Chinese indentured laborers brought ceramic technology with them to Singapore, and they made the cups and in the dragon kiln that, near which my studio is, at the same location. And they also, the Indian laborers use these cups to collect rubber from the plantations. So I thought for me there was a lot of history of Singapore that was embedded in this. And also the very fact that I was working at that location where these cups were made felt for me like almost like my own quiet performative connection to these laborers who had been making these cups, and the laborers who had been using. So the work is called Ode to the Unknown. It's an ode to the anonymous, unknown laborer that almost that they become invisible. We hardly notice them. And that's why in the middle of these cups are photographs, archival photographs from Singapore's archives of laborers and their, just an attention to them through this cup. So for me, the installation had a lot of history embedded within it, and it felt really good to work on that installation. And Pandemic Pills is in the work that's there in the show right now. And it's a work that, again, came up during this time. There's never before has the entire world experienced the same emotions almost at the same time. So I looked at the 7 stages of grief. So you start with disbelief and it goes on till you accept. And so I took those as my starting point, and I was thinking about how everybody in the world was rushing towards, so how do we get out of this virus? Is there a vaccine? Is there a pill? Is there what is the medication? And all these were the only conversations happening, because we wanted a quick fix and we wanted a pill, and so or a vaccine actually. But I took the pill as my vehicle to talk about the emotions that we go through. And like Jason, I also connect to this ephemerality of putting it on sand, rolling it on sand, and how emotions are again something that are ephemeral. What I feel today, I won't feel tomorrow, and I'll feel it again in another couple of days. So it's cyclical. It has that same cycle of life, death, and rejuvenation sort of thing. Emotions, just as human beings. And so so I wanted to use it on sand. I wanted to have people connect with it very slowly as they roll it, try to figure out what the word is. So again, slowing down, which is something that has happened in the pandemic for everybody, was also kind of built into the work by the very action that somebody has to take to complete the work. So the audience has to complete the work to know what it is about. So, so that's what that work was, how that work came about.
Right. The thought-provoking nature of these installations prompt questions about ceramics, which is still restricted by its limitations of function and craft, that ceramic art was not expected to address issues of social concern or intellectual content, but your works are great breakthroughs. They are surprising and meaningful and present a new way of looking at ceramics. A while ago, an art historian has called ceramics' position between art and craft an intervening space. To be more precise, the space between function and non-function, between tradition and breaking with tradition, and craft-based art and idea-based art. Madhvi, your work is often a response to the space or location where you find yourself, and you have lived in a number of places, from India to UK, America, and now Singapore. So would you like to comment on ceramics as intervening space pertaining to your practice especially?
Yeah, we can see the video on Earth's Whispers, and So this work was made in 2016, 2017. And this was a time when I was going a lot between India and Singapore, and Mumbai and Singapore, these two cities, both of which are my homes. And looking at every time I went to Mumbai, things would change. Every time I came back to Singapore, there would be something else. If I hadn't been to a location in Singapore for 6 months, suddenly the gas station was gone and there was something else, or some trees were cut off and there was something else built. So it was this change that I kept thinking about, how urban spaces, these two urban cities, which were my cities, how they were both kind of developing, and whether, and especially in terms of trees, we were cutting trees, and it was almost, one forgets the memory that the tree existed at this place. Sometimes these trees are only remembered by the name given to a street based on the tree or something like that. So those were some of my emotions when I started conceiving this work of Earth's Whispers. I also was interested in performing objects rather than me performing, having the object perform. So I had a robotic light that kind of moved back and forth, that created shadows. And again, it talked about the ephemerality of the earth and how that was sort of disappearing. And as we were living in more and more of more of an urban space. So it was made with mud and brick and had sounds of nature, but yet you only saw these building-like structures. So that's what this work was about. And the next work that I have, which is Forest of Shadows. This was made for the Indian Ceramic Triennale that took place in Jaipur. And again, this followed from the Earth's Whispers, because here are trees that were kind of very ephemeral in their nature. They were only cast, you could only see the trees in the shadows, and you go closer and then you see the object that's casting the shadow. So I was very interested in this, the idea of the shadow, because it's sort of it's something that you cannot hold on to. It changes shape, it's shape shifting, and it kind of gives you that sense of disappearing. So it was really the trees that had again, it was about the trees, and it was also had connection to Jaipur as a city which had block printing that happens in the same alternate manner in which these trees have been installed. So that was where I borrowed that idea of how it was going to be set up along with the trees. And the structures you see on the side in the Indian Ceramic Triennale was referring to the dialogue of urban space and nature, and how do we negotiate these two.
Very nice. Thanks, Madhvi.
Thank you.
Coming back to the exhibition, and from all the examples of ceramic works shown there, we can see that anything is possible for the inspired artist. A teacup, a vase, a building like Nelson's, or the pandemic tales of yours. And often the experiences that one has with ceramics are thought of as aesthetics. In fact, clay and ceramics have been used for centuries to express aesthetic ideas. So hello, Aiwei.
Hi.
There is a subtle beauty of the Shaman tea room that you are presenting, from the conception of the tea room to the selection of the materials, down to the workmanship, like your big flowy tea dress. Would you like to talk about the tea ceremony and how one might experience this kind of aesthetic, or what we might call a tea aesthetic?
Yeah, but I think before I start with the tea room projects, I just want to say, after listening to Jason and Madhvi just now, I'm thinking actually my relationship with the ceramics is quite different from Jason and Madhvi. Is because I think it's so great that how they use clay in the art practice, and ceramics in my own practice and context is rather very subtle, and yet it's so important as well. Okay, so so let me talk about the tea room projects. Actually, the tea room project, I started it since 2018, And the initial idea was to explore tea as a medium and to explore different pocket of spaces in Singapore, the public spaces. So I did this, it's called Fitness Corner Tea Room. I did at a neighborhood fitness corner at Bukit Batok. And back then we are trying to repurpose a space into a temporary tea room. So it's sort of like a social intervention kind of performance or exploration. So tea is a language of expression to me because what I believe is the blurring of art and life. For I think that tea is a very everyday life item, or very or that's what we are familiar with, and that it could make communication easier between between people. So I think by doing this tea room, I'm able to manifest this notion of the blurring of art and life in my own practice. So after that, so we have explored different public spaces, such as like this one, the fitness corner, and also like some staircase at the HDB flat, and also basketball court, and also some random pathway also around the neighborhood HDB. So after that, I expand this tea room idea by making my own tea dress, because before that, I'm doing at different public spaces. It's kind of like a non-specific tea room. So after that, I make the tea dress, the flowy tea dress. So I set my own tea room perimeter. So the audience, they sit on my tea dress and they are having the tea session with me. So actually the idea of the this tea room is to have a very mindful experience and being slow, because the process or the action of brewing tea or drinking tea is a very slow process. And to be able to slow down, then you will be able to listen or to see, to hear, and to smell better. So the mindful experience is what we always looking for. And for this specific tea room in the van, we invite people to come to our van. We park the van at Golden Mile Complex at the car park. So people, they have to make appointment, and we did a 40-minute session for every one of them. So so as they were sitting on my dress, they feel very conscious. So I guess that is what I think. They are also being mindful, because they are worried they might pull the dress and the teacup might topple and things like that. So they were very careful and very mindful of how they behave or how they sit. And it's also same for me, because everything is on my dress. So I have to be very careful with all the hot water and all the things that is around me. So I think this is also one of the practice of being mindful in a very physical manner. Yeah. So.
Right. The tea ceremony is a culture in which ceramics are a focal point. I understand that as the artist and the host, you have selected all of the vessels and even made some of them yourself in order to create a harmonious and good tea drinking experience for the guests. Would you like to talk about the role of tea and ceramics here?
Okay. So for the this shaman tea room is a project that we showcase during this Singapore Ceramics Now. And yeah, we make our own vessels and teacups, and we use it for tea, and also for use it as a music instrument during our performance today and also tomorrow. So actually, for my encounter with the ceramics, the teacups, was, I mean, it's a short story. It's about 2-3 years ago. It was an encounter. I went into a shop. They sell a lot of teacups, like ceramics teacups and porcelain teacups, and I saw some like teacups and some other teacups, and some teacups were more expensive than the others. So I was very curious. So I asked the owner, like, what's the difference? And because the price, they are really very different. So the owner explained to me, oh, because this teacup is made of ruware, is ruyao, and this is actually made of something with different glazing and stuff. And after that, he is very kind and invited us to sit down for tea, and he let us to try the teacup. So he brew one pot of tea and he poured into these different teacups. And I tried actually the different teacups with different glazing. It tastes really very, very different. So from then on, I start to understand that how important the ceramics, the teacups is in this tea drinking sessions, in this tea drinking culture. So from then on, I started to, in this tea room projects, because I really want to let people to understand about this the taste of tea as well, by using different teaware, different kind of glazing. You can have a different kind of taste, and how what kind of teacups you can actually deliver the optimum taste of tea. Yeah. So.
Indeed, the tea aesthetic is not just about the pottery. It is also tradition, it is art, it's philosophy, the tea drinking, and the whole experience. And ultimately, it is that the making of art and living life are interconnected, like how your art is situated in public places, in the parks and in a van. And now with COVID and everything happening around us, we do need the tea room more than ever. So thank you, Aiwei.
Thank you.
All right, let me have a look to see if there are any questions coming in from the audience. Okay, there is this question. Where do you see your practice moving towards? Are there any new techniques or ideas you would like to try in the future? Jason, start with you.
Sorry. I think for me, each time when I go on a residency or embark on a new body of work, it's always learning something new. Um, I just didn't like to keep repeating myself doing the same thing, even though repetition is my strategy and my methods of production, because that repeating becomes creating a rhythm, and creating the rhythm ends up as a momentum in the process of creation for me. But what I meant by not repeating is to not repeating the same things that I make. So going to different residency allows me to be influenced by this different surrounding, and different residency would have different equipments, and it challenges me to approach making work uh, by how do I deal with whatever restriction of facilities or endless possibility. All these are quite important for me. Doing kind of like residency and gaining new experience each time.
Right. And Madhvi, how about you? Do you want me to repeat the question again?
No, I got it. I got it. So no, I'm
Okay.
very much. I connect very much to both the panelists, and in a lot of ways. So for me, I allow life to dictate to me, my circumstances to dictate where my work is going to go, the space in which I am, the opportunity that comes to me will dictate how my work will develop. And like Jason, I also work with repetition. Repetition is something I like to get into the zone of almost like a meditative zone, because I'm repeating continuously the same form, but the idea is changing. And I also like to pull a thread from my last idea to the next place. So it's never something completely out of nowhere. It's always coming from something somewhere that I have done before, but it comes out in a new way. But I can pull the thread. Maybe other people can't see it, but I can see the thread.
Right. And Aiwei, your thoughts?
Can I repeat the question?
Okay, where do you see your practice moving towards? Are there any new techniques or ideas you would like to try in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Because nowadays it's very difficult. I'm doing tea room, so it's already very difficult when the COVID started, and that's why we do this like live streaming tea room performance where it's supposed to be a very experiential experience that people sit down and drink tea together. So before that, actually, we and Jason, we are like discussing like how should we do this, and this is not cannot justify the experience and things like that. So finally we thought, okay, we do this and do this. So we are trying our best to bring this experience to the people. So I mean, for me, I'll still be doing this theorem project in the future, no matter what happens. But we'll do it in a slightly different way. Maybe when the situation gets a bit better, we can still allow people to come in a small group for tea, or we can still do a live performance. And it's still very experiential way to enjoy the performance. It's just that I couldn't serve you my tea, but I'll be brewing tea. I mean, the whole action, I mean, the whole ambient and this immersive experience will still stay true. So I foresee in the future, maybe we'll be doing something more like online if things happen still like that, like we can't travel for the at least 1 or 2 years. That I think it's very interesting that this kind of situation actually force people to think out of the box, to do something that you cannot ever imagine. Like last time, like, oh wow, I can do this like in this manner, and you can do that in that manner, but actually this is all possible. So I think this is like a restriction, and yet this is actually a, a, a very liberating way of living now, like for artists or for everyone now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a question from the audience to Madhvi. I notice you use varied forms in your work and switch to many concepts often, unlike the contemporary art practice. How do you keep your work so varied yet bring in an identity?
I think, like I said in the earlier part of the question, was that I'm influenced by what's happening. I allow life to inform my practice and what's happening in the world around me, what's happening in my physical space, what's happening in my mental space, and then I'm pulling a thread from what I have done before into my next work, and there is a sort of consistency that you may not see, but I know where it's coming from because I'm pulling from one idea to the next idea. So um, I'm glad that it looks different every time, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
All right, thank you, Madhvi. Okay, another question for Aiwei. Could you elaborate a little about your tea practice or philosophy? Is brewing good tea properly actually important to the ceremony? Or are you just using tea as a medium for you to express your ideas and notions? And what ideas and notions are they?
Okay. Okay. So at the very beginning, what I always stay true is I must brew a very good tea to my audience. I always want to serve good tea to audience. So through the tea leaves that I use, and even the teaware, and even the water, I will always make sure that they are good. If not, I wouldn't want to serve my guests, because that is from the very beginning when I started to do tea or tea room, that is what I want to let people experience. Because for the fact is, I wasn't a tea drinker before. I always drink coffee. That was like many years ago, until one day I have tried someone's tea at somewhere, and I start to realize that actually tea, it doesn't taste so bitter or so like dry, like how I always drink those those Chinese tea at the Chinese restaurant. They taste like when you pull out the drawers like 20 years old, and then the smell, the very woody and very stinky smell, that kind of puer. So there's my memories of tea. And that encounter a few years ago, I started to realize that tea doesn't taste like that. So that's why I started to to learn about tea. I learned about brewing and making a study about water and everything, because my ultimate goal is I still want to brew good tea to my guests. And tea, yes, it is a medium for me as an artist, as an art practice, because like I say, when I still want to brew good tea and having this good session, and this communication during the tea room, it is beyond art context, because from the previous session when we are having tea, we don't talk about tea. I mean, we don't talk about art. I mean, yeah, so the boundary between the artist and the audience is actually blur. And without the audience, I'm not the artist, right? Yeah, so when I brew tea, I need audience. So I mean, this interaction is mutual. So I think this tea room practice, this process itself is aesthetic itself. So I think just similar to like Jason's or Madhvi's work, it is very ephemeral. It is very durational based. It is about the process. And I think that is the beauty and that's the aesthetic of it. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Aiwei. So, questions for Jason. You beg to differ your opinion over presence of ceramics in contemporary art. I would love for you to elaborate more.
Christine, can you reinterpret that question for me, because I don't really quite understand.
As in, so ceramics is not ignored in contemporary art. Okay? Contrary to what others believe. So how do you bring those points across?
No, I think the trouble with ceramics is that it's a very technical medium, that we always use all these technical things to describe techniques and finishing. But we don't hear that so much when it comes to, say, a sculptural piece of work. They don't have all these technical terms in terms of talking about a piece of sculpture. For me, I think it would be great if audience can just see ceramics just like sculpture, see them as a three-dimensional form, and then that would really open the door and acceptance for ceramics to be in this so-called contemporary art world, because at the end of the day, you still have a depth, height, and length to what we do. So why I don't see why we can't have ceramics in this contemporary. Why should we this pigeonhole ceramics so small into this tiny pigeonhole that is like totally cannot be equated with the other contemporary art form. So, but on that, I'm talking about objects. But there's the other practices of using the medium as a installation material, which basically involve ephemerality and kind of a time-based kind of longevity. And so things like putting clay work into the expanded field of art, like doing clay work using video, doing clay work as a performance object. These are all possibility of how clay or how ceramic can be in this contemporary art world.
Right. Okay.
I hope
And
I answered that question.
Fine. Thank you. One more question for you, Jason.
Yeah.
When you were doing the performance piece and being covered with clay, what emotions or thoughts were going through your head at the beginning? And what, if any, are going through your head as you began to be more covered with the clay? What were your thoughts and emotions?
Yeah, I guess for me, every performance piece that I do, I put myself in the situation of taking risk. So I have this mental or this visual in my head that, okay, in this piece I just want people to cover me up in clay. At the end I'll be like cocoon to the pillar. That is my visual image. But of course, the visual image being realized in the process of a performance or having audience to take part in creating the image, to a certain extent, I kind of do not have control anymore with how the audience should put the clay on me. All I can do is become like a structure or a prop for them to just plaster clay on me. So what I only give advice like, I'll just build from the bottom to the top, so that I can kind of still have some control about breathing space in a way. I don't cover my head first, or else I cannot breathe.
Cannot talk.
Yeah, I can't talk or anything. But the first feeling of clay on my body was this cold, material on my body, and soon my body started to adjust to that cool material. I was quite okay with it. Then I can kind of like feel people padding on the clay, which is, though I don't feel it directly because of the cushioning effect of soft clay on the body. But then when the clay start to encase my head, so all of a sudden there's a darkness. All of a sudden I can't see anymore, and suddenly I feel that the air is quite limited. It's just a total sense of I guess claustrophobia starts to set in. And in fact, someone actually make a small little hole at the side for me to breathe. Yeah, so that was the whole feeling, from a kind of very open feeling, feeling the material, and then also the weight of the material on my body and on my shoulder, and finally everything becomes dark.
Right. Okay. I can't
And of
imagine
course,
myself.
the smell of clay is intense,
Intense.
because I'm just totally covered with clay. The smell is one of the experience that I can't forget. Yeah.
Right. Very interesting. Okay. There is a question for Madhvi. You also have a love for literature and classical Indian music. Have they also found an expression in your work?
Yeah, I suppose it's all in the background through your subconscious. Things are always coming. I haven't quite separated things out to say this is where the Indian classical music is coming into my work. But it's all part of the aesthetic, I suppose, that you develop in your subconscious. You know, you grow up with certain influences based on where you grow up, and then they all sort of feed into your practice, and you're doing something and suddenly you think, where did this come from? You have no idea, and if you really look deep enough, you would find that it came from some aspect of your life.
Right. Nice. Okay. A last question for Aiwei. How different is the context of tea practice in Singapore and Malaysia compared to Taiwan and Japan?
Wow. Actually, it's quite interesting that I did my first tea room project in Malaysia last February, and I realized that there are a lot more young people who are tea drinker, because those who join my tea sessions, they are what I consider young people, compared to in our like notion like tea drinker, they are like old people, and so I would say that over here it is more popular. Yeah, but it's different, depends on whether you are talking about in an art context or in a more leisure way, because definitely there are a lot of young people, they drink tea as a beverage. Yeah, so it is a very different context, like how I try to introduce my tea room project to people. Yeah, so for Taiwan, I'm not too sure, but I have heard my friends say that in Taiwan, like they drink tea every day, like drink every day, like every minute, like drink until midnight, like they're still drinking tea and things like that. And Japan, I think quite different, but I do know some tea artists in Japan. They're also doing like beautiful tea ceremony, and they also very interesting setup. They also do their tea room in the wild, and they also brew not just Japanese tea, but they also do like Chinese tea, like tea ceremony, yeah, in a more maybe Japanese way, if they are doing Japanese tea. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thank you. So if I may just sum it up a little from what we hear from our speakers, It appears that time is a condition for the work of Jason, Madhvi, and Aiwei. The continuation and repetition, whether it is forming clay or performing some action, involves time. Time and memory merge into each other in all their works. There is a slowness as well. The activity of sculpting or performance is not one that plunges headlong into the final image. Rather, it is a slow investigation of the possibilities inherent within every stage of its making. So thank you so much, Jason, Madhvi, and Aiwei, and to our audience. Okay, now a final call to come see the exhibition. So don't miss Singapore Ceramics Now, the inaugural exhibition featuring work by 19 artists, and to experience and reconsider Singapore ceramic art, its history, its contradictions, its diversity, and its implications now, all at Gillman Barracks, Block 7, Level 1. There will be artist demonstrations, curators-led tours, raku faring, live streaming of Aiwei's Shaman Tea Room, live performance by the Observatory, and much, much more. So thank you so much, guys. We see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Christine. Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.